Welcome to the fifth and final part of the Becoming a Resilient Scientist series. And today we'll talk about managing up and maximizing mentoring relationships, and really two parts. A little bit in general about the philosophy of having a team of mentors and who your PI really is when you think of the word mentor. And then a second part really about managing up or working effectively with your day-to-day supervisor, which often we use the word mentor interchangeably. Before I start, I want to acknowledge last unit we talked about feedback, and in the spirit of honoring hearing feedback and considering feedback, I want to thank UC Davis, who emailed me and shared a little bit of a perspective on the talk on feedback and pointed out that there was a lot in that talk about communication styles. And part of it wasn't really exactly about feedback and whether that was a good thing, not such a good thing. And so I've reflected on that a bit. And first, I want to say thank you and invite everybody who has feedback about the entire series to please feel free to reach out. But second, it's interesting. I can see the point, and I looked at the slides, and I thought, well, I could probably pull out a couple of them and give a little bit more of a scenario base for some of a feedback session. When you hear X, you might consider doing Y, saying Y. And so I think I will consider that for the next time I do this. That said, I have this strong belief that very, very often it is all about style, that there is so much behind how things are said and received and how unique we all are in how we want to be communicated with. And so a part of me says, yes, it was a lot about communication style, but a lot of issues are rooted there. So I'm going to split the difference a little bit and try to honor that feedback. But I did want to thank the folks at UC Davis for that. The goal really now is to put things together and talk about supervisors and mentors and how they are the same and how they are different. And so I just want to start with some definitions. And at the heart of it, a supervisor is someone who is responsible for making sure work gets done. So the manager of a research group is the supervisor and manager of individuals. A mentor is someone who advises and guides an individual, both personally and professionally. So if you look at those two definitions, I think it's hard to imagine the same person doing both, at least all the time and perfectly gracefully, right? One person, it's sort of, this is what needs to get done and how we'll do it. And the other function is, how are you? What do you need to get ahead? What experiences matter for you right now? Where are you at now, and where are you going? Now, two other things that we need in the workplace. One is coaching, right? And a coach is someone who teaches us specific skills. And generally, these skills in the workplace are important for advancing our education and or career. Someone who helps us learn to give really effective research talks, write an abstract, network, interview, right? Coaches help us develop a skill. And then finally, there are advocates. An advocate is someone who speaks up on our behalf and who recommends us for assignments, positions, or opportunities. When somebody advocates for you, they pick up the phone and they call a friend and say, I know you invited me to give this talk at the Gordon Conference, but I have an amazing fellow and I'd like to recommend her or him or them instead. okay? Or I was just at a national meeting, one of our fellows was there, a postbac, and they walked up together with a graduate program director that I know, and I said, you should really consider their application strongly. Here's the things about them that I recommend. So an advocate is in the public space saying, this person has merit. Look at their application, consider them for this assignment. I'd like to nominate this person to be on the training, to be on the retreat planning committee. So advocacy is in the public space. Mentorship is really in the private space. You sit and you talk. Now look at these definitions, okay? And especially focus on the fact that supervisor and mentor in science are usually the same person. We use those two words interchangeably, even though perhaps we should be more cautious. So if you think about it, the focus of learning in a supervisory relationship is the needs of the group. I need someone to do this assay. I pick you. I don't ask you, is this good for you right now? Is this high on your priority list? Is this a good time? It's, I need this, and you are going to help me with that need. So the style of help is much more directive. I tell and you do. Maybe I explain a little bit, but generally I'm the boss. I issue a directive, you follow it through. And as a result of that, the balance of power really rests with the supervisor. Now, in a mentoring relationship, the focus of learning is on the needs of the mentee. I don't need to learn that assay right now. What I really need to learn is some mentoring skills. Or what I really need to do is get out and network right now and spend a half a day shadowing in the clinic or shadowing someone in an office. It's my needs as a mentee. And as a result of that, the style of help is much more collaborative. We talk, you consider, you share, I listen as mentor, give you my thoughts, but largely you decide, right? So the balance of power is more equal and fluid. And it's really important to understand these differences. From the perspective of a trainee, right, a fellow in science, we need mentoring about a lot of different things. Some rest in the science sphere. How do I develop research collaborations? How do I decide which project to greenlight and which to put aside? How do I decide what I should do for the next 6 months? What's the low-hanging fruit to help me move my career forward? But fellows also need mentoring about career and about personal issues and psychosocial issues, like how do I deal with my stress and anxiety about my dissertation or my imposter fears, or I really struggle with feedback. Can you help me develop some skills? Now, I said trainees need mentoring about many things, but the honest truth is everyone in the workplace really needs mentoring about a variety of things, about their work, their career overall and where it's heading, and then them within this career and work. So we need mentoring about many different things. Now, in addition, we often need coaching, right? Especially early in our career when we are developing a lot of new skills, we need a lot of coaching. I think back to when I ran a lab, and I love to write. I am a good writer, but I'm not a good teacher of writing. So I would hand back a document and there would be a long line down and it would say AWK, which stands for awkward. And some of my trainees, most of them would say, I don't know what parts AWK, right? So people in my group needed coaching in writing. I was their supervisor, I was their mentor, but not their best writing coach. So they needed to find someone else. We also need people to advocate on our behalf. That's a periodic thing in work. We don't always need advocacy, but as we move up to different levels, as we seek leadership positions within our group, as we take on a mentoring role, we do at times need people to advocate on our behalf. So we need a lot of things. And if we just pick the word mentor for now, okay, understanding that that is a messy word, right? Because is it your supervisor? Is it your mentor? Which hat are they wearing? They're not good at every bit of coaching. They might not be an advocate in every space. So ignore the messiness of that word because I had to put something on the title. Over the lifetime of your career, as you make transitions at NIH, whatever institution you're at, to another institution over time, we need individuals who help with a lot of different things, helping us define and refine our goals, meeting with us to discuss our progress towards those goals, helping us change those goals as they should be changed, right? As we decide we have new information and our goals have changed. We need individuals who coach us. And if they can't coach us, they effectively guide us to other coaches, right? So maybe I'm never going to be a good writing coach, but I help my trainees find a good writing coach. And I pay if the course or coaching costs money. We need individuals who talk to us about our career goals as they twist and turn and change as we learn new information about ourselves and our options. And eventually those discussions move from talking about career goals to talking about searches for new programs or jobs. Sometimes in the moment, what we need is someone to sit with us and address the personal issues that are impacting us in the workplace, right? With appropriate boundaries, right? And often from the lens of work, but sometimes we really need to be talking about these personal things. We have to consider new opportunities. There's a call for here at NIH, we just sent out the Summer Mentor Awards, right? Maybe you need to sit down with someone and say, is this the best summer for me? I fit eligibility. This could be a good opportunity. Here are my worries, right? That's what mentoring is all about. And the list goes on, right? Constructive and timely feedback, especially when we are struggling, to be there to say, have you tried this? Or I see signs of burnout and I'm concerned about you. Have you used these resources? Can I introduce you to the right people? We really need a whole set of things, all while we are making progress in our work, right? There's never only one bullet here. There might be a time when 80% of our energy is focused on one particular function, but our needs ebb and flow, and the mentoring that we need ebbs and flows as a result of this. Now take that introduction and just consider this, that in research and quite frankly, many other work environments, one supervisor, which we really could just call the PI. Some of you earlier career trainees might have a postdoc or a clinical fellow, research fellow, graduate student who is your supervisor, but we'll just interchangeably use supervisor and PI today. That supervisor is also expected to be a mentor, a coach, and an advocate. The system was built that way. When we use the word PI and mentor interchangeably, it's because we are sending the message. We think one individual can fill all these functions. Look at the list. I mean, as ludicrous as that seems, we have entrusted this one individual with all of these mentoring, coaching, and advocacy tasks. And there are most certainly benefits to this all-in-one approach. Somebody gets to know you and they know you really well. You need a letter of recommendation. Here's somebody who has talked with you about many, many different things. It may save time, right? You go in, you can talk a little bit about science, a little bit about that collaboration you might set up, a little bit about what you're thinking about in your career, a little bit about how things is going, boom, 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 I'm done, right? I think that there is the perception of big benefits in that regard. Somebody gets to know you, they get to know you very well, and they can serve many functions. But there are also a lot of risks. And the first risk is that mentoring is built on a mutually comfortable, not that every moment of a mentoring relationship is comfortable. Mentors have to kick us in the butt and help us have hard conversations and consider challenging things. But mentoring is built on a mutually comfortable way of engaging. It has to be a safe relationship where you can say, I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't apply to me right now. Or that might work for some other people you've advised, but that advice doesn't feel right for me. So differences in worldview, in the view of research careers, in communication, in conflict styles, all of these things get in the way and can lead to frustration and misunderstandings. Our boss can tell us something in a way that we don't especially like to hear it, but it's our boss, and we have to adjust to some degree. We don't have to listen to everything, but it's our boss. They're giving us an instruction. But mentoring is a vulnerable sharing place. To get quality mentoring means that you can sit and tell someone really what's happening. So there's a risk. If that person is a fine supervisor for you, but not the best mentor. In addition, we don't always feel safe disclosing to the boss, right? Who wants to tell their boss, I've decided to do something else and I'm going to start a search and some point soon I'm going to go. That may feel comfortable for some, but not for others. Alternatively, struggling in writing. Right? My boss just wants the draft. I say, yeah, it's coming, everything's fine, it's coming. But really, I'm totally burned out and dragging. And I don't want to tell my boss I'm burned out and dragging, so I say it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Sometimes we don't want to tell our boss what's really happening. A big reason that we do a full 90 minutes on assertiveness is we do all have to at times tell our boss hard things. But in the mentoring space, sometimes there are things we want to talk about that we would prefer our boss didn't hear about. Your needs and your PI's needs are not always fully aligned, right? And in fact, I think it's a great relationship when it's aligned better than 50% of the time. But think about it, right? And I hear this all the time from graduate students. They're just slowing me down because I know how to do all this work, right? Just when your need is defend, wrap up, move on, their need is this well-trained person could finish another little mini project for me, right? I've had times where a fellow said, I really want to spend a day a week teaching. Right? I'm going to join the teaching academy at the university because my career goal is teaching. And I'm like, I got a grant due. My career goal is getting those experiments done. And while there's hopefully mutually overlapping needs, the honest truth is they don't always overlap. Mentoring takes time. You have to listen, consider, share, hear some more, share again, revisit a topic, come back and update. Mentoring takes time. And time constraints can really limit a quality mentoring interaction if there's data to be looked at. And trainees point that out all the time, right? I went in with two objectives: to talk about my data and to talk about something else on my mind, and we got wrapped up in the data. It was a great discussion about the data, but we never got where I needed to go. In addition, while PIs have a tremendous amount of subject matter expertise, they don't always have expertise in every area relevant to you. And I'll give you two examples, one from science and one more career related. So my lab for years did cell biology, and slowly as proteomics became a really powerful tool for studying protein-protein interactions. We added a big proteomic arm, and I took in some graduate students from the computational biology graduate program. But I don't have a lot of expertise in computational biology. So when they come to talk about careers, I'm like, I don't know a lot. What meetings should I go to if I'm interested in this type of career? Well, I don't know. I haven't been to any computational biology meetings in my past, right? So sometimes even in the science space, they are experts in one part of what we do, but not another part. So they can't mentor us fully in that area. Around careers, we see it all the time. Postbacks who want to go to med school in a PhD lab, or someone who went to graduate school or professional school in another country where the application system is different, right? When I think about what careers I know well, it's the careers I've done. And even then, I have a pretty narrow view. So I can talk about being a PI at a large state university with a big research portfolio and very small teaching portfolio. And yes, maybe I've heard a little bit about other careers. I certainly have students and fellows who've gone on to other careers, so I can introduce you to people. But how can I be the most effective mentor about a career I know nothing about? And then finally, the last risk is that PIs generally know what they know, and they've pursued their career for a variety of internal reasons, and they may place a high value on some elements of mentoring, but not other elements of mentoring, right? I'm totally happy to mentor in science, but I don't want to really hear what's going on in your life that's leading to burnout. I just want you to solve it. Or I have no opinion about industry, or actually I have a lot of bias about industry careers, right? The really good career is X, Y, and Z. So sometimes they don't place a high value on some or all of their mentoring roles. So the system that we have built, where one person provides all these functions, and this list is way incomplete. The system we've built where all of this and more comes from one person is flawed. And I think that it is a part of the reason why so many people start out in science enthusiastic and get less enthusiastic over time. That's a complicated thing, and there are a lot of reasons. But if you don't get the mentoring you need early on to really form an approach to all of this that works, if you don't get all the coaching that you need to develop skills, to face where you don't have the strongest skills and what to do about it, it's really easy to get pushed away. So a couple of things to mitigate the risk of that. Even if you look and say, my PI does a damn good job of wearing all of those hats, seamlessly seems to be mentor one day, supervisor another day, coaches me in many areas, helps me find coaches, I can count on them to advocate. I think there are some really, really nice examples of where that works. But in general, we should consider it a system with risks. So how do we balance those risks? And the first thing is that we have to change the model in science that when you're choosing a research group, you say, this is the kind of science I want to do, so I choose this person. We really need to choose not based only on science. We need to choose about a broader set of issues, the climate in the group, their style, how well they do at mentoring, their belief about resource utilization, about well-being, about conflict resolution, etc. And I'm not going to talk about this a lot, although I will point you in some in the direction of some resources. In general, the best way to consider this is knowing yourself and what you need and exploring broadly all of your options, stretching the types of science that you will consider, okay, so that you have a broad set of people to choose from. And then you can interview if you are able to, you can rotate. Graduate students who join programs that have rotations certainly have a leg up. You do your research, you talk to alumni, you talk to current people, you ask questions that go beyond what techniques can I learn here, and do you like this research group? You consider options, you choose a group, and really to thrive in that group, you are constantly thinking, where are my gaps in my self-awareness? How am I working with this person? How are our communication styles? Am I finding other mentors to fill in the gaps, etc.? So this just is a iterative process. A couple of helpful resources on our YouTube channel are there. Making a Successful Transition to Graduate School talks a lot about finding quality mentorship from your PI of record. And Finding Your Research Home is about just finding a position at NIH, but it applies everywhere. You could skip the front end that says search this database or that database, but the back end really is, how do I find a place that will fill many of those needs? And then right here in the middle is a link to our website where we wrote a big document on thinking about climate, the way a group engages, what types of collaborative opportunities there are, how people access resources in that group. It's very NIH-centric because I wrote it for NIH, but if you just ignore some of the NIH-centric, it's a great philosophy of expanding the definition of PI, right? To make sure that you will get both supervision, right? Because absence is not quality supervision, right? Go figure it all out yourself is not quality supervision. So it's about finding supervision and mentorship within the same group and appreciating that even beyond that, you have to cultivate relationships with mentors outside of your group. Now, some of these mentors are individuals who are paid to provide mentorship outside of the research space. Program directors at universities, training directors here, OITE staff, the career counselors, the well-being advisors in OITE. That is designed to give you mentorship in areas where you may not fill all your needs within your research group. But some of this is you seeking out from different sources. The reason to have multiple mentors is no one person can meet all of our needs or be available all of the time. And over time, we need mentoring in a lot of areas. Furthermore, as career options in science have grown, it's very clear that scientific mentors know a lot less about some things, especially in the career space, but in other spaces as well. An example, that example I gave about my computational students. And the way we solved those problems is they took a co-mentor who understood the computational side. And then we learned to speak each other's languages, right? They learned the language of biology and I learned the language of computation, and we did some interesting work together. So scientific mentors know a lot, but they don't know about everything that you need. And finally, even if you really land the sweet spot and you are getting a lot of what you need from one person, multiple perspectives drive creative solutions. Multiple perspectives can be stressful in the moment because you're hearing different things and you're like, oh, which one, right? How do I decide here, right? So there is a challenge in getting perspective from multiple people. But in general, multiple perspectives drive creative solutions. In finding outside mentors, one of the most common things, often students will come and talk with me having acknowledged they need more people to talk with. They need help in different areas and they want to stretch and expand their mentors. And that part almost feels like the easy part, I want to do this. The next part of how do I find these people can sometimes feel like a challenge. So just quickly, I encourage people to journal a little bit about really at the beginning, the first question, what am I looking for guidance about, right? Not broadly, I want to talk about my career. That's too broad, right? Although if you're really, really open and that's where you're at, starting with somebody with broad knowledge could be helpful. Generally, you want to get deeper, right? I want to explore these types of careers, know what I'm missing on my CV, know what I can do now to fill gaps, know some timing about things, like get deeper, right? So spend time journaling about what you're looking for. And then you meet with people. And I do think the easiest way to start is with institutional resources. People who say, mentoring matters to me. That's why I have this job and I'm available. But you can think of other ways to meet people, and we'll do that in a little bit. And then you go and you meet with somebody. And after a meeting, you have to ask yourself, do we connect? Did I feel comfortable sharing? Did they talk so much I hardly ever talked? Did they tell me what to do or help me strategize, right? Did they pause and hear where I am at? Do they respect me as a person across hierarchy, identity differences, experience differences, etc.? That's the first thing. Is it generally comfortable? The second thing is maybe the first time it's just an introductory meeting, but over time, am I getting a balance of positive input and hard questions? Sometimes we really just want to be appreciated. And we could use a moment or many moments of talking about what has gone well. But eventually, we want to have mentors who can say, okay, let's put away those positive things for a moment and talk about where you're feeling some struggles. What's going on that isn't quite as good, right? So do I get the right balance? Or the other way, a mentor just challenges you again and again and again and never celebrates you. That's not the best mentoring relationship either. And then over time, as you're paying attention to that, it's also, do they find time for me? That doesn't mean they are always available, right? Because people are busy. That means, in general, if I make a clear ask for a meeting, do I get it sooner rather than later? Are they clear with me about the time that they have, right? So a couple of questions to ask yourself and pay attention to. Shared life experience, shared career experiences, shared career goals, shared identities, these things can all be helpful, but they're not a prerequisite for a successful mentor-mentee relationship. Curiosity is, respect is, the ability to listen is, but you don't have to have overlapping goals, identities, experiences, etc. At times, we decide we do need that, right? I can think of a time in my career as I was starting to look for leadership roles where I wanted to speak to somebody in a leadership role from the LGBTQ community, right? I've had people come and say, I really want to talk to another woman scientist, right? We have students in all the different affinity groups say, can you help me find people from my community? There is no doubt that that can be a very positive, beneficial mentoring relationship, but mentoring relationships can happen across very broad differences. As long as there is respect and as long as mentors are good listeners, willing to learn, willing to say where they don't know as much as they are willing to say where they do know. And because finding outside mentors is so critical, it is really worthwhile talking about how this happens. And the first step is developing networking and communication skills. People say it's very hard for me to to network as an introvert. But the honest truth is much of our networking is one-on-one quietly in someone's office, at a picnic table, at a national meeting on the side. It isn't about going to parties or big events and handing out lots of cards and grabbing lots of cards in return. That is one kind of networking that some people love, but a lot of the networking that leads to quality mentoring relationships, short-term or long-term, is more one-on-one or small groups. It's about going to lunch with the seminar speaker having a question and connecting over that question, not about running around giving out cards. So although networking is often seen as negative from some people's perspective, think of it as developing mutually beneficial relationships with various people in and out of your field. It's human connection with a purpose, okay? Sometimes the purpose is just that at that minute you are at a meeting and it would be good to talk to somebody about their experience of that talk as well. Sometimes networking doesn't have much purpose beyond connecting, but often the purpose is for you to learn and hear and share and get perspective. And I've already stressed how much I feel that institutional resources are so important. I travel all over, I get invited to give talks, and some students are front and center. They introduce themselves, they come in with some prepared questions, and it sometimes leads to further discussions. It sometimes leads to offers to come to NIH. It sometimes leads to, let's stay in touch if I can ever help, right? It can lead to advocacy. Not every institutional resource needs to be used all the time, right? So we don't want you to get overwhelmed with networking, but having quality mentoring relationships means that you work to develop and cultivate relationships with professionals who can help you. All right. And if you're not sure if someone can help you, it's perfectly reasonable to try one time and see. As long as you are respectful and thank someone at the end of a conversation, you're not signing a long-term, right, into some long-term deal. And so I just want to really stress that so much mentoring outside of the research group comes from developing these relationships. Built in within branches and branch meetings, department seminars, graduate student seminars, built in at national meetings where there's a drop-in in the evening for people interested in X, Y, and Z, or a career workshop, built in by the fact here at NIH and at many universities, you can go online and make an appointment with a training person here to support you. So I just want you to think for a moment about some places where you can meet potential mentors. So let's go ahead and use Slido to help us with that. And it'll just take a minute. Click on the either take a picture of the QR code, or you can join at slido.com and put in the number. So conferences and classes. Students, teachers having office hours is a great way to expand your mentoring. Lots of people putting conferences. Well, I think we probably should have done it as a Wordle, but that's okay. Volunteer organizations, LinkedIn. So somebody pointing out that electronic mentoring can help. Professional societies, symposia, lots of older students, more senior fellows, right? Joining fellow groups, right? Joining here at NIH FELCOM or the Graduate Student Council or the Postbac Committee, or a special interest group, people interested in immunology at NIH. So lots of ideas here. Somebody points out clubs. I would actually like to stress and sort of point something out about that. Sometimes through our personal life, we end up with a mentor that influences and helps us in our professional life. There's a kid who lives across the street. Somehow he heard I worked at NIH. He knocked on the door and said, "Can I talk with you about careers in science? Can I talk to you about NIH training programs?" And I did not meet with him in that moment. He caught me at a bad time, but I said, email me. So at the gym, on the side while you watch your kids play soccer or dance, right? Chatting with people, what do you do? All kinds of things. There's a comment about scientific papers, right? And journal articles. This paper really interested me, and I'm thinking about similar types of questions. Can we talk about it? Alumni groups is another way. So a lot of great ideas here. So that's Number two, we meet all of our needs by having a community of mentors. Now, when it comes to science, we have to be a tiny bit careful, right? Because the work we do in somebody's group is under them, and we're not always free to go and talk about all of the details. Some PIs prefer, before you talk about science with your science in their group with someone else, you talk with them. Some are very free and say, go chat with people. If you're ever going to collaborate, make sure to touch base with me first. People are different about that, okay? So you want to keep that in mind. But the rest of this, the career mentoring, the psychosocial networking, the can I talk through things I'm thinking about mentoring, you want this community. Now, the third general strategy for dealing with the tensions between people's supervisory hat and their mentoring hat is to learn to talk with your PI about your goals, your wants, your needs, to bring up these conflicts, right? To be able to bring up your needs even when you know their needs different. And we've talked a lot about this in the assertiveness section. We talked a lot about risk-reward scaffolds. We talked a lot about making sure to use institutional resources to practice. The higher the stakes in that conversation, the slower you want to go. If it's a small stakes conversation, maybe you don't even need to practice. You just need to ground yourself, center yourself, say it out loud in front of the mirror one time and go in and have the conversation. But if it's a really big place where your needs and their needs don't connect, then it takes more practice and more support. A lot of this is about assertiveness skills, remembering boundaries, understanding that you have both rights and responsibilities within your research group, but there are rights there as well. In the end, the goal is to talk with your mentor about your needs to try to minimize those tensions. And that's not the purpose of today, so we won't spend a lot more time there. I also think beyond this type of general schematic of your perspective, your mentor's perspective, you know, what is your clear ask, all the things we've talked about, every case is individual. And so it's really important to think about it from sort of where you are at, what you are asking for, and who you are asking it of. Some PIs are easy, some PIs are more challenging, some more seamlessly wear both mentoring, coaching, and supervisory hats. Some are often supervisors, and their idea of mentoring is really supervising. So it depends. So I won't talk a whole lot about that. But the bottom line is we really all need multiple mentors, and we cannot rely exclusively on the PI of our research group. As somebody who's now closed their lab and works in an office, I cannot rely on my boss for my mentoring needs. I have to get my mentoring needs from other places, sometimes my boss, but often other places. We need mentors who know our field, who know about career paths that interest us, who know how things work at our institution, right? How somebody transfers research groups at NIH is different than how they do it somewhere else. How you deal with various complexities at each organization differs. So you need people sophisticated about the organization where you are at. And one other thing about mentoring is we want to have relationships with people who inspire us, who push us to be our better self, right? As we work to define what our better self is, we want to have mentors who have personal attributes we admire and wish to explore, emulate, etc. So we need a team of individuals. While you have one supervisor, and they do have a right to say, when it comes to making scientific decisions, you need to consult me. Around everything else, it is your right to have multiple mentors. And I think that it really helps people to expand their mentoring network. So many stresses that lead to so many stresses that lead to stress, so many stresses that lead to disillusionment in what we're doing and how we're doing it I think, can be resolved by multiple mentors. We will still have the same ouches that we currently have. If imposter fears get in our way, they will keep getting in our way. If assertiveness is a challenge for us, it will be a challenge for a while as we work on it. All these things don't go away, but we give ourselves this community to help us grow and learn. So I'd like you to all think about your mentors beyond your PI. Like, how many mentors do you have? From none to 10 or more. And we'll just wait for a while for some votes to come in. So there's a large number, almost half of 2 to 4. For those people who've said none, I would encourage you to think about institutional resources and reach out. Start by trying to find one person. Sit for a moment and think, what is it that I need mentoring about right now? What would be my most emergent issue? And try to find some folks to talk to. 1 is better than none, but I do think 2 to 4 or 5 or so is the sweet spot. Those of you with 5 to 9 or 10 or more, for some people that is really suits them. For others, over time, they want to sort of have a set of mentors they see more often and some mentors they talk with less often. But in general, reflect on whether you feel you have mentoring, the mentoring you need. And that's what this is really about. So this is about journaling later. We won't have small groups on this session. We have learned that Thanksgiving grabs everyone's attention, and the groups are not as helpful. Also, I think this talk in particular, if you need to talk about it, it's helpful to do one-on-one. So if you're at NIH, I invite you to reach out to me, and I will make sure someone in the OITE is available. I will be available, although I'm going to take a tiny bit of longer leave next week. If you're somewhere else, I think if this really weighs heavy and you finish this first part by saying, I don't feel that I have the mentoring I need, reach out. And if you don't know where to reach at your institution, please send me an email. So this is really a journal prompt for later. And I would like to just set our intentions for a moment. If you could just type in one thing you will do now to expand your network of mentors or to refresh the relationship with a mentor that you already have. So reach out and ask for meetings. Go to more seminars and journal club discussions. Reaching out and catching up with current mentors is an important one. Checking in with a career mentor, you know, the holidays are a beautiful time for that. It's such a regular time to check in with former mentors. Everyone loves to hear from people. So that's a really good idea. Being more mindful of needs, right? I think some people looked at that list and were probably surprised. We used to have more time and we'd ask people to generate the list, and I was surprised sometimes how short it was. Send a howdy to a mentor I haven't spoken to for a while. Reaching out to people at conferences. One of the things about conferences is there's almost always a career development subcommittee. There might be a mentoring subcommittee. It can be a really great way to get some mentoring. It's also a really safe place. It's outside your institution. It's a low stress practice environment. I'm going to just end this section by commenting on work on my own mental blocks to keeping in touch with people, refresh relationships. I do think we have a lot of mental blocks about whether people want to hear from us, whether they mean it when they say we'd love to get together. Some of that comes from the fact that people let us down sometimes. So someone says, oh, I'd love to get together, and then they don't answer the email. but maybe they just missed the email, or it's sitting in their drafts folder. And if you said, hey, just sending a gentle reminder, you'd get a warm invite. So our mental blocks is a big thing. That said, people let us down, right? So if we don't get the mentoring we need from one person, try to find someone else. Don't give up on the process. So that's the first part of the talk. We are going to segue to talking about relationships with your PI, and I will try to use the word PI here and not mentor, but it is ingrained in us that these are the same people, so I will get it wrong at times. But I want to talk about the principles of managing up. Managing up is defined as knowing your manager's style and adjusting your own style so that you can work effectively together. Now, managing down could be knowing your staff's styles and adjusting your own so you can work effectively together. Both parties should be working to accommodate each other's styles. But today I'm going to talk about you managing up. Okay, that means you are very aware of your manager's style and you adjust your own so you can work together well. For example, I've had two bosses at NIH. Both of them love to talk about non-work related things. I actually don't mind talking about non-work related things, but I can get pretty impatient and try to bring them, oh, let's talk about work again. And I have learned in both cases to make slightly longer meetings so that we can bond and connect over those personal things and those stories they want to tell me so that I can get to what I want. That's knowing your manager and adjusting. I'll give you an example from my research group. I was an early morning person and I go get coffee midway through. I come in early, I work before anybody gets there, and then at about 9:30, it's like, oh, I want to walk across the quad. At Chapel Hill, where I ran my lab, there was a quad to go to the coffee shop. And it was so interesting. I had a group of trainees that always popped their head in almost on time. It was as if they had a clock set, you know, an alarm, Sharon's coffee time. Oh, can I walk with you to get coffee? Can I walk with you to get coffee? And they always got a really sort of fresh, open Sharon. I wanted to chat a little bit. They had an idea. I tend to say no very quickly. A part of my management style is to say no and ask people to really defend their idea. That can be okay, but it's sort of nice to get open Sharon who says, oh, that's interesting. Here are some thoughts about it. They noticed my schedule. They noticed when I was most open, and they took advantage of it. Okay? That's knowing your manager's style and adjusting your own. A couple of things to keep in mind. No two people have the same work and communication style. Tensions occur when people have very different styles and when they have very similar styles. And we talked about that a little bit with the communication discussion last time. Styles irritate us more when we are stressed, and styles are exaggerated when we are stressed. Likewise, when your boss is stressed, their communication style is exaggerated. Their cognitive distortions are exaggerated. So if we are going to get the most out of a relationship, we understand how people behave in their best self and in their stressed self and in their really stressed self. One of the reasons why this course is so needed, and we start with well-being, is we tend to work on the stressed side of that continuum, and no one is their best self when they're stressed. So we need a language for defining and discussing these differences. We need various models. I've introduced you to some of them already because awareness is the first step. So if you are going to manage your boss well, you need to understand their communication style and be able to work with it to some degree. Yes, in a perfect world, they will ask you how you like to receive feedback and they will adjust. But not a single one of us works in that perfect world. So we have to also be able to adjust. And I'm not going to talk a lot about these communication styles. We talked about it a lot last time, but I just want to remind you that many, many issues between a manager and an employee are differences in communication style. Not all, but many. And in addition, think about how your boss likes to address difficult conversations, conflict, challenging conversations, negotiations. Are they avoiders? Do they tend to compete? So you're going to have to really stand strong and make your request very strongly. Are they people who, if you give them some time in advance notice in writing, they will come to the table more collaborating and compromising, right? So you got to know their communication style and in many ways their conflict style. But that is like the beginning of the tip of the iceberg. So there are a ton of work style differences that have been described in the literature. Some of these are really big in research environments. And one of them is problem-focused or success-focused. So problem-focused individuals could see a talk that they think is 95% excellent, and they focus on the 5%. Right? Rather than going and saying, here are all the things you did well, they say, you really blew that section on the CRISPR experiments. You didn't explain it right. You lost people. It took a long time to get them back, right? They don't start with, wow, here were the strengths. Success-focused individuals talk about how well things went. If you are success-focused and you want to be appreciated, right, the feedback, the critical problem-focused feedback is a challenge. How we see deadlines and view time, right? Some people say, I'll give it to you Monday. They mean any Monday in the next 3 months. And some people mean Monday, right? I'd like to have this from you as soon as possible. To some people means early, in advance of the deadline. We had an employee in OITE who would say, I don't need it for 2 weeks. And then she'd be upset when she didn't get it in 2 days, right? Oh, you told me 2 weeks. Yes, but I'd rather get it early. We all have different views of time, how we like to be rewarded and how we reward others, right? The acknowledgement slides in talks, how people are given perks for doing a good job, how much we value work, friendships, and relationships, right? So I'm happy to chat personally, but with my boss, I'm not really all that interested. But my boss is very interested in sharing those stories, right? So we just have a work style difference, right? And I want to get things out of my boss, so it's easy for me to listen to the story a little bit. In fact, sometimes when the story starts, I imagine a little button on a microphone, the tape being hit. I'm like, okay, here comes the story, and in 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about the appeal issue I need to talk about. Whether we're open to or cautious about exploring new ideas. This is a key one in research groups, especially depending on where the PI is in their career, where they are in their grant cycle or review cycle. Sometimes we just want to do the low-hanging fruit. And sometimes we want to do the really big, high-risk, high-reward work. And sometimes we want to go back and forth between the two, right? And so it can seem like I'm not getting my needs met at all if you are on one side and they're on the other. Most of these things are a continuum. None of us are rigid on that continuum. It depends on context and circumstance, how we're doing, right? How we view uncertainty and change. This is a big one right now because we have no idea what's coming down the pike with a new NIH director and a new set of policies at the executive level. Some people embrace uncertainty. Some people really struggle with uncertainty, right? And how we deal with that plays out in our stress management and our communications, how we work with others. And it just goes on and on, right? And some of these are like really small details, like the best time of day to ask people something, their first response to an idea, right? The initial response to bad news, right? The cells are all contaminated, right? The last thing you want is someone to tell you a catastrophizing, horrifying story in the most intense communication style. But that's how some people respond to bad news, right? And so it's like you got to wait for that big energy to come down. Whether we answer emails, whether we remember what we agreed to, right? I sent an email recently about why did X happen? And I think it was Uli actually. And she said, well, because you told me to do it that way. Oh, okay. Now, over time, I've learned to assume that I forgot, right? But early on, I'm like, no, I definitely didn't do that. And if I did, you should have heard me differently anyway, right? Bosses have their styles here. You are somewhere on these continuum. They are somewhere on these continuum. And unless you're aware of it, there can be huge struggles. You need to understand your PI, their preferred way to communicate, their most approachable best times, their need for proactive FaceTime. Do they need to see data hot off the press or really cleaned up, thought out data, in which case you want to give yourself some prep time? Their need for social interaction, written documents and planning summaries, right? Some people want a long written document. I tell people, I don't want to hear the weeds. Please, I don't want to hear that. Stay up high, right? So that's an adjustment for employees who work with me. And sometimes they say, Sharon wants to be up high, but I got to pull her down to the weeds. How am I going to do that? Desire for details in communication, hot button issues that irritate them, right? And then a bit about mentoring beyond science, their interest or ability to provide the types of guidance I want, I need. This list goes on. In many ways, you want to think through the personality of your PI. And then knowing that, right, and acknowledging that people are who they are, right? They might change a little if I point out a few things I would like them to change, right? But they're not going to totally change. So knowing who they are, how am I going to get what I need from them, right? What can I do to address this, and what cognitive distortions and imposter fears and desires to always be liked are getting in the way? Because eventually this leads to an improved relationship. I talked to somebody the other day who said things are a lot better, and I said, why? And number one was, I'm talking to other people. And number two was, I figured out how to limit interactions to positive times. It's not going to last forever. I'm going to need to move on, but I am way less stressed, so I can think through moving on. I am way less stressed. I can get some work done. So I wanted to give you this long list, which is sort of an open-ended, let me write a bit about my PI. But this is a really nice work styles assessment. It literally lets you put on, it gives you all of those and more than the things I listed, and it lets you, you can print it out. And I tell people, circle you and put an X where you think your PI usually is. And then to highlight ones where you think if you made some change, you would have a better experience. You would get more of what you need. Some of the more you're going to get from other mentors, but some of it you want to get from your PI. Putting it all together, just journal. My PI often is, does, uses these styles. I am, I use these styles, I do. Where does this work for us? Where is this just a disaster right now, right? And which parts of this can I control by talking with them? Which parts can I control by getting my needs met somewhere else? Which parts of this can I control by flexing a little bit? I have seen, you know, I don't think any of this is the answer to fixing a really dysfunctional relationship between a PI and a trainee, but these tweaks can make a big difference in increasing satisfaction at work and increasing the chances of you getting what you need, particularly if you combine it with judiciously and wisely finding other mentors. One of the easiest examples of that is in the career realm. Sometimes people say, I'm really disappointed my PI is just not helping me with my job search or my school search or my applications. And I point out, well, really, it's not their job. I know we implied that it was, right? You're supposed to get everything from this one person. But really, do you need to? Do you even want to if they offer it, right? So some of that is easier. When it's scientific mentoring, it's harder to tease out. And when it's relationship issues, right? Each of us has our own vulnerabilities of what we can handle and what we can't handle. So we have some options. If we look at all of this and we say there are things we'd like to change, you know, one of the things is we can talk with your PI or supervisor about the issue. I like to say strike while the iron is cold. There's a management theory. A lot of things in management are taught with little pictures and phrases. Strike while the iron is hot, which means give feedback right away. If you see a behavior, strike right away. But the honest truth is, if we're irritated, our feedback is delivered with a side of snark, right? If we're upset, we can't always think calmly. So I think discussions about the relationship and mentoring and getting what you need are best done when the iron is cold, meaning when there's no big issues and it feels relatively easy. You want to remember all of the different things that we learned in the assertiveness, in the cognitive distortion, in the feedback, I statements, and active listening. Also focus on the we and not only on the me, meaning we have work to accomplish together here in the group. I can contribute to moving us ahead. We want to have something to prepare, right, to present. So a little bit of thinking about yourself within the group. Sometimes we decide something is a deal breaker, and sometimes we decide it's not a deal breaker. But often we're not intentional about stopping to do that, and I think it's really important. So if you decide that it is not a deal breaker for you, that there is something that's not optimal in your relationship, but it's not a deal breaker because there are many good things. There are three things. One is to find others to fill in the gap in your needs, right? That's where you're missing something, fill in the gap somewhere else. Another is to find healthy outlets for dealing with that particular style. A group, a student discussion group, exercise, taking walks after especially intense meetings, right? Setting some healthy boundaries. I'm not going to check my email after X time. I'm not going to get, you know, poked into answering right away. If I get an email at night, I'm going to do X that I really enjoy before I decide whether to answer. So find healthy outlets. And a part of it is to know the style and expect the style. Our bosses are who they are. They might change a little bit. We might change in response to them a little bit. But we need to know the style and expect the style and try to separate the style from the person and the outcome. One of the reasons why I talk so much about communication styles is a lot of times fellows say what was said was fine, but how it was said really gets to me. And I'm really struggling with that. So now I can't actually think about what was said. So there is an element of knowing the style and expecting the style, with the caveat that people should not be demeaned, they should not be bullied, they should not be harassed, you should not be on the receiving end of repetitive, again and again, microaggressions, again and again, unwelcoming behavior. So I always worry about this slide because, yes, there is some element of accepting things, but there is a too far. And when we have multiple mentors, we can start to get some confirmation about what is too far. You know, if we lined up all PIs, on the one end of the planet would be great mentors and good mentors. There's good enough mentors. They poke us in some ways. There's absent mentors, which I don't know that I would consider to be a good mentor, but some people where they are in their career, absent mentor is okay, right? They acknowledge right now I have an absent mentor. I have filled the gaps. I'm doing fine. And then there are unhelpful mentors and unkind mentors, and those that are unhelpful and unkind. I mean, sadly, you know, on the one extreme are really tormentors. And it is really the responsibility of leadership to deal with that, right? And I do think institutions are thinking more and more about that, but we don't think so much about this range of absent, good enough, unhelpful in some areas, unhelpful at times. And you really need, if you find yourself in the wrong environment, you really need to decide what's next. And there are essentially 4 options. And one is to accept how it is and do nothing, either in the moment or forever, right? I accept this and I'm going to do nothing about it. You can try to change the situation. You can try to change yourself and your response to the situation, or you can leave the situation. And people say, oh, you can never do that. Can't. I hear burn bridges so many times in a week. If you don't have a good relationship, there is no bridge. And the sooner you realize that and make decisions about what comes next, the healthier you will be. And again, I want to stress, we don't accept a situation that is unsafe or unhealthy. Part of the reason why we have a mental health crisis in the research community is this belief that we have to stay silent and accept what is. That power is so pervasive and bridges are so important, and no bridge can ever be burned, and people stay and suffer in silence. In part because the hierarchy makes it hard to speak up. International fellows have an added burden. Early career scientists don't have stable funding, right? So if you speak up and somebody says, that's it, leave, there's a lot of reasons why so many suffer in silence, but I hope discussions like this and the message again and again to find resources, talk to the powerful people who can help you, will make a difference. So how do we decide of these options? And the first thing is to ask yourself, is it a problem or a problem, right? 80-point bolded, yelling out loud problem, or a small, 12-point little p problem. It irritates me, but I wake up in the morning and I realize, it's okay, right? Is it a big problem or a little problem? I find that when we are stressed and dealing with problems is not the time when we're at our best self for figuring that out. So it's really helpful to talk with other mentors about it. It's why you have to have people outside of your research group. Sometimes we can reframe a problem into an opportunity. Somebody says, I just hate the way they give feedback, but then we talk about what they want to do, and it's a pretty intense career, and there's going to be some intense feedback. Here's all these positives. This intensity of feedback I view as a negative. Can I reframe it as a learning opportunity? So sometimes we think it's a big problem. We reframe it into a learning opportunity. Sometimes we realize the problem is leading to mental health issues, confidence issues, right? We really don't feel safe. And sometimes we need help to sort that out. A big part of that are the risk-reward scaffolds that we talked about in Unit 3. I suggest revisiting that whenever you start to say, I have concerns about my boss, and I want to decide whether and how to deal with it. So I'm going to go through those 4 options. This is a really more nuanced talk than you can deliver in a slide. So I'm going to do my best in these 4 options because I think people don't hear enough from senior leadership that people change groups all the time and thrive. They soar, they sail. Like I have seen so many people say, this group is not for me. They believe it's them. They go somewhere else and they blossom. I am not saying it is easy. I am not saying you should do that without lots of discussion, right? And making sure institutionally you have guidance. But I really want to go through this so that everyone hears various options. I will get a lot of questions about people's unique situations, and I will say, without knowing all the details, I would not want to advise you. So let me preface this by saying, if it pokes at you that maybe you're in the wrong place, please make an appointment, whether it's me, someone else in OITE, someone at your school, a mentor that you really trust. So we accept how it is and do nothing when we're generally happy and most of our needs are being met, right? Something driving me crazy, but for the most part, I like it here. I can accept this way of doing things. Or we are really close to the end and we don't wish to derail the relationship or progress, or we're close to the end of something. Sometimes I'll say to a fellow, is there a paper? Yes, soon. Okay. Can you reach a point where the experiments are done before you decide to do something, right? So largely accept how it is. If it's a short-lived experience, you go to somebody's group for 10 weeks to learn a technique, again, remember the caveat, you shouldn't be unsafe, okay? So this isn't be quiet if you feel unsafe, but as long as you are generally safe and it is short-lived, sometimes we decide to accept how it is and do nothing. Now that means truly letting go. If we're going to stay somewhere where our boss pokes us, we better be able to let go, right? We need to be able to say, I don't prefer this, and in my next boss, I'm going to try to find somebody who isn't this way, but I am truly okay with letting it go. We then need strategies right in the moment when we're faced with what's bothering you. We can't have a cycle of they irritate me, I hide, I stew, I ruminate, I get really edgy, I'm not my best self, oh, it gets better. They poke me again, I stew, I ruminate, I'm not my best self. We have to have strategies for letting go. Often this is when nothing is wrong, but there are big gaps. And then we have to fill those gaps. We have to find people to fill those gaps. And at the end of each of these, it is going to say, take care of your well-being. Because when we exercise, sleep, eat well, do the things that were in those first well-being collages that we talked about in Unit 1, when we do that, we can accept hard things much easier than when we don't do that. And I have to say, I really felt that. I was at a meeting, I came back totally drained, and it was amazing what 2 hours in the kitchen followed by an hour at the pool with the coach yelling, faster, faster. It was amazing how much stress just went away. I do think we can accept how things are when we take care of ourselves. Now, sometimes we want to try to change the situation, and actually, most of the time, I think we should try. There's an occasional time when we're so close to the end and it's just not worth it, but for the most part, we should take our agency and our power and we should try to change it, especially if we haven't discussed an issue yet with our PI. They cannot read our minds. Even if we think they should be able to read our nonverbal communication, they can't. Nobody can. So if we're unhappy about something, but we've never discussed it, we should try to change the situation. When things are generally positive, but the issue is a major concern, I really like this group, but I'm very concerned about authorship because this new student has gotten very close to what I'm doing, and that's sort of fun, but also worrying me quite a bit. Generally positive, but here's something really weighing on me. When you really love the science, but you really have concerns about the environment and you want to make it work, it is worth trying. For one thing, if you try and things change, you just met some of your needs. But if you try and you get a talk to my hand, this is the way it is, you just got a big data point about your well-being in that group. So I think trying to change the situation is important. If we want to change the situation, it starts with conversation. We have to talk with the PI and other relevant parties. We need to get a lot of advice and guidance depending on the individual. And I would encourage you to revisit earlier discussions about assertiveness. Now, another part of this one is there's a lot of fear in this, right? If it had been easy, you would have brought it up before. So this one is one where the emotions of fear and catastrophizing stories can really get in the way. So we have to deal with that. Practice helps with that, talking to others. I always say, let's talk about the best possible outcome. Now let's talk about the worst possible outcome. And very, very often what's put on the table, as soon as the words come out, somebody says, oh, it's probably not going to be that bad. It's probably going to be this instead of that. And then again, taking care of yourself. You cannot go in and have these kinds of conversations if you are exhausted and burnt out and barely in control of your emotions and your well-being. If you are telling yourself really damning, catastrophizing, I don't matter stories, you can't go in, stand proud and say, here's what I need. The third thing is leaving the situation. I have a phrase, I wish I didn't have it, but it's called beating the love of science out of someone. And the honest truth is people beat the love of science out of us sometimes. Absent mentoring sometimes, but certainly unhelpful and unkind mentoring. And sometimes it's really just fit. Sometimes, you know, the person seems lovely, but boy, they just don't have a style that works for you. They think they're being helpful and they are beating the love of science out of you. People who are very direct communicators, who are also problem focused, right? That can beat the love of science out of some. When you appreciate that staying is impacting your health and well-being and mental health, when you have no sense of psychological safety, you're so afraid of making a mistake that you can't thrive in the group. Those are reasons to leave a situation. In addition, if you are just starting in a group and you have other options, like you're a rotating graduate student, you have your own funding, you're in a program where the institution says, if it doesn't work out, we back you up, it is worth considering leaving sooner rather than later. Not so soon before you try to change things, before you think it through. Transitions are hard. So there's sort of a sweet spot of I've tried, I've given the transition time, I've done all these things to advocate for myself, I have carefully assessed the situation. Is it time to say leaving would be a better option? People think because of funding that they have no options. And not to say everyone has infinite options, but you should explore what your options are, what protections there are for you at your institution. Sometimes it's not really possible to leave a situation immediately, but you can quietly behind the scenes begin searching for a new position. People say, I won't get a new position, I won't get a letter. If I'll burn a bridge, it'll be the end. I think I have seen hundreds of people change in my career, some with money and help, but some behind the scenes on their own, right? Especially if you reach out to people who can help and guide you. Obviously, science would be better if this never had to happen. If everyone felt psychologically safe and could go to their PI and say, we're a bad fit, we don't match each other. Can you help me, you know, over the next year, look for a new position? And that's where I hope everyone finds themselves. But let's be realistic. There are challenging situations. If you are considering leaving, you should think first about trying to improve the situation. That's often, but not always. If you really feel unsafe, sometimes really leaving is appropriate, okay? Sometimes it's just not right. It requires that you carefully think through your options and your approaches, and that should be done with institutional resources. If you're at NIH, you should talk with OITE. If you're at a university in a graduate program, you should talk to the graduate program director. If you're at a postdoc at a university, find the postdoc office, use the resources that are available to you. And if you notice, there's take care of your well-being, but there's another bullet. So I have spent a lot of time with people who have had negative experiences in research groups. And I now think of it as a backpack with really heavy rocks in it. And the rocks are very uneven, so the backpack isn't packed very well. And there are some super sharp edges. You got to get rid of that backpack or else you can't move on successfully. You need a private place to process what happened. The disappointment, the anger, the confidence issues that it may have caused. People need to process what happened. Okay? There's learning, right? Maybe there are things you realize you did that contributed. Then you can work through them, learn from them, move on. There's letting go, right? There's all kinds of things. So when you want to leave the situation, I think that there's a big need to process what happened. I would also say that is true if you just decide you want to leave a career path. Like I left physical therapy to go into science, and then I ran a lab, and one day I thought, oh, I can do both. And I did for a long time. I did a ton of administration and a ton of science, but one day I realized I couldn't do both. And I really had a backpack in processing that. So transitions need to be processed. Now, the last one is to try and change ourselves and our response to the situation. And this really applies to all of them. Even if we decide to leave, we want to look at how we responded and learn from it. If we stay, right, are we going to stay and totally accept it or stay and make some change? And I've sort of alluded to this all along, right? But sometimes we've tried to change something, we weren't successful, and we are very close to the end, and we decide it is well worth staying. And so we want to sort of fortify ourselves, get more mentors, and thrive through the situation anyway. And again, deal with emotions at play, find support, and take care of your well-being. How we decide which option is right for us, I wish there was a form you could fill out. You could add up the numbers, and the numbers could say, oh, 0 to 20, you're okay, go kick your PI in the butt. 20 to 40, you're okay, get some advice, and then go and talk with your PI. I wish there was a way to make this easy. But the honest truth is how we decide what's right for us, it really depends on our relationship, the satisfaction level in the group, the investment we've already made. I will say two things. Remember the bridge. People say, you know, I don't want to burn bridges. I'm like, if you don't respect them and they don't respect you, there is no bridge. Okay. Furthermore, we are not obligated to stay in touch with everyone we have ever engaged with in our lifetime. So ask yourself, is it really worth it? Right? Am I staying for a legitimate reason? This idea that certain people are so powerful that they can block us in science is a bit of truth mixed with a bit of exaggeration. And very, very often we appreciate that that's a story built on those exaggerations, and we can think through the risks, right? Maybe they might be on study section. So will we include a letter? Or do we actually have an aha moment that if I trained in their group, they can't be on study section, right? And review my grant. So I do think sort of that I don't want to burn bridges come into play. The other thing that I hear a lot is I've worked so hard, I want to get something out of it. And there's something called sunk cost fallacy, which is we invested so much already, we are not going to let go, right? And sometimes even if we've invested a lot, it's time to let go. And one of the ways to get around sunk cost fallacy is to do these tune-ups and check-ins about relationships early and often. How am I doing at 3 months, at 6 months, at 9 months, at 1 year? And if we have some mentors to help us do that, it's often can help us decide sooner rather than later. We want to find and use resources as we work through options. And there's a big problem here. When we are having trouble, our confidence goes down, and the last thing we want to do is talk to people we're not comfortable with. So we really need comfort with institutional resources before the problems start, if they are going to happen. And so I think getting to know institutional resources early makes sense. So when there are programs, show up. When there's an open office to visit and meet people, show up. If you feel like you would just benefit from an hour meeting with somebody in the postdoc office, the graduate student program director, ask. Maybe you won't get an hour, you'll only get 30 minutes, but when you know someone, it is easier to reach out. All right. And when we are really stressed, we are not our best, most creative problem-solving self. Our window of tolerance is slamming shut when we're making these decisions. So it's not the time to say, who are the resources? Now, each and every one of you can help people by pointing out resources, but the best, most proactive thing is knowing them in advance. And finally, as we decide which options are right for us, this is a time to visit counseling services, support groups, all of those well-being issues that we talked about. To do well, we have to be well is really true. And it is never more true than when we face a hard time. Like right now, I think I have turned back to that first slide deck more times than in the whole last year in just the last month. Lots is happening at my house, lots is happening in the world. And I just go back to that slide deck again and again, right? So double down on taking care of yourself when you're addressing these kinds of hard things. No one is a great boss 100% of the time. No one does that dance between supervisor, mentor, coach, and advocate perfectly. They will step on your toes, you will step on their toes. There will be really rough days. Many scientists have not had a lot of management training, and it shows. And I think it's one of the biggest hubris in science that we think because we're good in protein-protein interactions and cell biology that we're going to be good mentors. I have noticed a big shift. I just got back from a meeting. There were a lot of students at my well-being talks, but there were a surprising number of mentors. Like it really made me believe culture is changing. I will take a break for a month, and then we will start 2 months. We will start raising a resilient scientist, and a lot of PIs will be there. But you are a part of the generation that can change this. Actually, by completing this course, you have already shown yourself to be a part of the solution. We all need to be able to shrug it off, forgive, forget the small things. Same on the other side. PIs need to learn to shrug it off, forgive, and forget. They work on that just like you need to work on that. We're all works on progress. I used to think I had to have the last comment in every discussion, every email. The other day, I sent an email. I personally didn't think it was all that snarky, but my boss must have felt that it was snarky because I got quite an email back. And I must have written 3 responses, and then I deleted them all, and then I forgot about it. And, sometimes we just have to forgive and forget. That said, we need to be in an environment that lets us grow and learn, particularly early in our career. You need to be seen, heard, and valued for who you are, and you need to be in a place that helps you do that. Part of that responsibility is with your PI and all these other mentors, but some of that is with you. So I just want to end with a couple of pictures, and I'll take a few questions and make some thank yous. So I love art. My wife is an artist, actually, so we spend a lot of time looking at art. This is a photograph from Yves Klein. It was made in 1960, so this was not photoshopped, okay? And it's called Jumping into the Void. Actually, I think it's called Leaping into the Void. Turns out it's a celebration of space science, of space exploration. But I saw this at the Hirshhorn at the end of a really rough week, and I sort of looked up and I said, that's what it feels like to be in science. There was a situation that had really upset me between a student and their PI. It's like what it feels like, right? You just leap out there, you take this big risk. So if we do this right, we do it with the help of mentors and many, many communities, and it is that celebration, which it turns out art historians have taught us a lot about that. But 2 other things, I don't know, but I think that's incredible. It was just a sea of green, and then there was just this red. Like, do you? Like, you can be that splash of red wherever. You can be different. Yeah, there's a lot of things about conformity in science, but the best part of science are all the people. So find a place where you can do you. Maybe you got to tone you down occasionally. Maybe you got to make some changes to be professional occasionally to, to make it work, right? We all have to do us with a little bit of a twist, a smoothed down version of us, but do you. And finally, every year we put up milkweed with the hope that the caterpillars will take root and they will turn into these beautiful butterflies. That is literally about 20 seconds after that butterfly broke out of the cocoon. And it stayed there for a while because the wings are so wet that it can't fly. So we watched it and eventually it dried its wings and it flew off. It's an amazing developmental process, right? That was a caterpillar shitting all over our garden. I mean, they make a total mess. And then they turn into that. So in the best case, and in what I hope is every case, everyone gets a chance to transform and morph into whatever it is that you all want to be. But without a doubt, it comes at a price if we don't take care of ourselves. And we have not been saying that enough in science. While much of this rests squarely on leadership's shoulders to improve the climate and to make sure that people are taken care of, you cannot thrive without the principles discussed here in leadership courses beyond this and training of all types. So thank you for coming. And thank you for participating. Uli has made this happen. It would not happen without her. So please answer one of her emails with a bit of gratitude. This course started as an idea on the back of an envelope, and I think we've delivered it some 20 times now. And I don't think that would have happened without Uli. So with that, I will thank her and all of you and take questions. And, oh, that's right. You have to switch this over. Meanwhile, in the room, I can't believe it's dark out. Anybody in the room have questions or comments? All right. I've also heard the term sponsor. Is that the same as advocate? Yes, that is another interchangeable word. How can you tell if someone is a mentor if there is no formal label? I think you should ask yourself, hey, take care. Happy holidays. I think you should ask yourself, do I tend to come to this person to bounce off ideas, seek guidance, and get feedback? And if the answer is yes, then they are most certainly serving in the capacity as a mentor. It is reasonable after a number of meetings to say, I get a lot out of speaking with you. I always consider your feedback and find that the meetings are helpful. Could we have a regular set of mentoring meetings? You could formalize it. I think there are a lot of people who are my mentors I've never had that discussion with. But there have been times in my career where I have. And likewise, me as a mentor, there are people who come regularly to chat and they've never said, you're one of my mentors. Is that okay? It's sort of unspoken. But there are people have said to me, I am missing career guidance in a lot of ways. You've been helpful. Can we meet for regular mentoring meetings? So the first thing is internally, does it feel like that? And the second step is, do I want to have a formal discussion? How to overcome trust issues with mentors. My former PI was good and helpful at first and then became abusive and wanted things to get done without concern of my career personal needs. Now I'm worried other potential mentors will be like them. How do I overcome this worry and trust that my future mentors will be better? That's a little bit about that backpack I was talking about, right? We make assumptions, right? So if one mentor took advantage of us, like the only way for us to process so much that comes at us in one day is we make mental models. So if we have a mentor model of PIs ask you to do things and then don't come through for you, the next PI we work with, we put on the same mental model. So we want to be able to be more mindful and pause and say, okay, is my fear right now based on prior history, or based on the current situation? Is it exaggerated? Do I need to take a deep breath? And a lot of it is processing the experience and learning how to ground ourselves in the moment. On the seek help things, it's really cool that NIH has all of the OITE resources. It's really a support and helps. Thank you. Although that PIs have the capacity to say, this is a final renewal without any explanation, is there a way for us to be sure going through all of this won't backfire, specifically for people in visiting fellow positions? So I'll tell you, that is the reason why people have to give notice of non-renewal in enough time for people to land on their feet. Yes, without a doubt, there is risk in speaking up, because someone can say my way or the highway, right? If you don't like it here, move on. But at least here at NIH, I feel that the requirement for warning and a good long amount of warning is important. I don't think there's ever a way. For one thing, I struggle with telling somebody to stay in a place where they're not wanted, right? Or where they're not happy. So I'm not sure that a required X amount of time would help everybody. I am sure that the requirement of notice and support, we have a transition support group, you will have a coach to help you. Most people land on their feet, but I can't ignore the fact that you are right, that a non-renewal is at the discretion of the PI, and that sometimes people get a non-renewal when they wish that they could stay. You've mentioned the importance of letting go, which I think is a great point. Do you have specific strategies you recommend that help with letting go? Because it can be hard sometimes. Also, can you talk about letting go in the context of leaving a situation? So letting go, one strategy is, right, so I'll just use my name for an example. That's just Sharon being Sharon, right? When experiments don't go well and Sharon is stressed, she repeats her catastrophizing thought 5 times before she calms down enough to help me solve the problem. Deep breath, stretch, that's Sharon being Sharon. Then you can move on, right? Another thing is there another explanation to this? I said something the other day where it was pretty black and white for something rather gray, and I said it, and then I said, or alternatively, there are other explanations. Here are a few of them. So that's another way of letting go. Sometimes we journal and go through something and we just decide, you know what, I don't need to talk about that. So that's another strategy. In the context of leaving a group, I think letting go is leaving calmly, professionally, seeking resources. There are papers. I'd like to discuss them, get it on paper. Here's my notebooks. I've cleaned my desk. And then it's talking through the disappointment and the leaving. That's what I mean about letting go. Early in my time as a doctoral student, we were told mentorship is not an institutional value, and therefore there was no way to motivate or enforce better mentorship by PIs. Could you talk a bit more about how we can change academia to deal with the fact that mentorship isn't incentivized for career progress? So first of all, let me say, ouch, that is just painful to hear. Somebody mentored each and every one of us and helped us get to where we are, and we should pay it forward, and institutions should build a climate that rewards mentoring. I think one of the things is that we need to be careful about going to institutions like that, right? Whether that be at a leadership level, whether that be a student. I mean, maybe more and more we need to ask about mentoring programs and training, and is there career counseling, and is there a well-being program, and what happens when a visiting fellow wants to change groups, because it is more vulnerable, right? I mean, the honest truth is that the institution has visa responsibility and should make that clear and step in to help. What are the policies that protect people? Protection will not be infinite. And when you land in a not so good place and need to get out of it, there is risk. Many people, however, have navigated that risk successfully by getting advice, by moving in measured ways, and by using those resources. So people need to choose the right places. Those of you moving on to leadership positions in research institutions, you can be the change. There are PIs who show up at every one of our training who reach out and say, I'm struggling with this person. It could be me. There are some things about them that maybe need to change. There are some things about me that maybe need to change. Can I get help? Regular coaching, mentor courses, those are the things that change the culture. But for an institution to say mentoring is not one of our core values, I would say that is not a place that should, I mean, that's just really hard to hear. It's not a place that should be training people. I'm a new postbac that just started working. What's one piece of advice you would give me about cultivating relationships that isn't already on the website or handbook? I think a lot of what we think is, I wrote a lot of the settling in part of the website, and I feel like I went on and on and on. And you all know already I can be wordy. So I can be wordy in written documents too. I think the piece of advice that I would give everyone is spend time getting to know everyone in the group and asking questions. Find out who the helpful people are in your immediate group, in the surrounding, in your branch, on your floor. Be really curious at the start. I know there's this need to protect ourselves and figure things out on our own. And yes, there is something to be said for asking at the lowest possible level some questions. You don't want to always go to the busiest, most powerful person, but be curious and willing to ask questions. If I understand correctly, managing up means to adjust my communication style and try to get from them what I need. That is one way, right? If you have a boss who does much better with a meeting request, an agenda, and a set of questions in advance, adjust your style and give that to them. If you tend to be very avoidant, but they really need a lot of information and discussion, try to meet them where they are. It's not just about communication style, but those are two examples I would give of where communication style would be a part of it. As a trainee who recently accepted a faculty position for next fall, can you speak a bit about finding mentorship as you transition from trainee to PI? How do you cultivate and identify mentors in faculty colleagues? The exact same way. First of all, congratulations. And second of all, the exact same way. You meet with faculty at your new institution. You have some questions. You pay attention to who asks you questions, who listens, who seems to be giving you advice, who is trustworthy, right? Who shows up, who isn't looking at their phone while they're chatting with you. You get a sense of, does this person seem to give me the attention I need? Use institutional resources. If there is a mentoring committee, form your committee and go meet with each person. If there is a faculty academy to improve teaching and learning, join it, because those are the people who really care. They are at those types of meetings. Go talk with the graduate program director, the dean of faculty affairs, host a reception, go and introduce yourself. Find, again, just like for new trainees, be curious and ask questions, new staff members, new PIs, new people in an office. Be curious and ask questions, and slowly you identify who are the helpful people. I, as a new faculty member at UNC, had a couple of people who I started working with, and after a while, I realized that one of them was actually not helping at all, right? And I was spinning my wheels in hearing that feedback. And someone else was such a good listener and so thoughtful. And I finally went to him and said, I would benefit from regular meetings. And he agreed, and we met for several years. And then he said, pay it forward. Here's somebody who needs help, right? So look for the people who want to help. Would it be okay if I sought mentorship from a PI at another university with whom I previously interviewed, was offered a postdoctoral position? I really loved his mentoring skills and style, but ended up choosing NIH for other reasons. That person may be very willing to continue a dialogue. They may say, you know, I have to mentor the people in my own group, but it is certainly reasonable to reach out and say, I really valued your perspective. Would you be able to meet with me? Also, I will say this, I have seen NIH fellows tell me I had a great run here. I'm glad I came, but I met somebody years ago and that person is still on my mind, and working with that person is still on my mind. It's fine to reach back out and see if that relationship is still a possibility. What's the best strategy to deal with intense and problem-focused PIs? Number one is well-being. To deal with receiving feedback that comes with barb, snark, and intensity. Number two is really good well-being and support system, exercise, sleep, some healthy boundaries, even if they roll their eyes and I never take a vacation. You need one, you take one. So boundaries are a big part of it. You know, some people say to me, it's really worth it. Like, I don't like the way this person communicates. It is a really challenging style for me, but everything else I'm really happy with. And then I'm like, okay, then accept the style, right? Know the style, accept the style, deal with the style. So put your meetings late in the day and go home, right? Or early in the day and go take a break, or on Friday so you can get away, right? Know what it is that's going to make you able to do that. However, I will say that I think that is a learned skill. Dealing with intensity like that on a regular basis as an early learner is a learned skill. And a lot comes into play around identity and career paths and confidence. There's a lot of reasons not to do that before you're ready to do that. And that takes some self-compassion to say, this might be great science, but I've talked to people here and the intensity level is not what I want right now or not what I want ever. That takes some self-compassion and self-worth. And you need to be able to do that too. Any tips for finding mentorship when it seems like a lot of the resources in your program are aimed at a different type of student? If you're a master student, and most resources seem directed at the PhD students. I've had people say it's a postdoc heavy organization at NIH. All the resources are for postdocs. I have heard people say, I feel like there's a wealth of resources, but they're not for me. So I'll use this course as an example. I think I give way too many my science-centric examples come right out of my experience, and I've never been in an epi lab or a behavioral lab or a clinical group, and I don't know those examples. And certainly if you're here and you are a genetic counselor or a nurse practitioner or outside of the life sciences, I don't think the examples resonate. Sometimes you have to just look for the part that works and ignore the part that doesn't resonate. Sometimes, however, you need to go to your program director and say, there's a lot of resources for PhD students. They seem wonderful. Which do you think would be best for me as a master's student? So it's partially using what's available and ignoring the parts that don't resonate and trying to apply them to your situation. And it's partially trying to change it. Go to the people at your institution who care and say, is there anything we can do? We just got an email from a postbac who's a pre-vet, and they said, there's not a lot of resources for the pre-vets. Can we do something, right? And I was like, whoa, blind spot. How could that have happened, right? So it's okay to point that out and give feedback and ask, could you give me some suggestions to rebuild a relationship with a former PI, especially who was not nice to me, was toxic and burned a bridge? I am just looking for suggestions whether it's good to continue and bear the sad burden or just move on. I think you have to ask why you want to rebuild that relationship. And if there's a really valid reason, then you're going to need to think through where you will see that person, what could you do to reach out. If you just want a superficial light relationship, you could send an annual holiday or start of the year greeting. But I think some of the words in that paragraph there make me say, build relationships with people who aren't toxic and who respect you. I have had a lot of people in my research group, and I think I'm a pretty good mentor most of the time. Some people have left with various fit issues, stress issues, relationship issues, but in general, I think many, many people have thrived with me. That said, I'm not in touch with many of them, and I don't think it's hurting their lives. If they needed me, I suspect they would reach out. It's certainly not hurting my life not to be in touch with everyone. This idea that it's a lifelong relationship is a part of the myth that that person, one person, is going to be everything to you. So I'm not so sure I hear a need in that particular question. However, I don't know the whole story in that little question. And so I encourage you to journal about it, talk to some people you trust about it. If you're here at NIH and you want to chat, I will be back. This week's pretty full, and next week I am going to be in the kitchen and at the swimming pool. But the week after, I will be back, and I'm happy to talk with you about it. So I cleared the Q&A box. I'm going to end by thanking you one more time and wishing you all the very, very best, both in your careers and in your life. Thank you all for participating. And that's a wrap.